All right, so welcome everybody. Sorry for the short delay here in the beginning. My name is Michael. I work here at Tembi, and I'm joined together with our CEO Christian and Percival Leitner from Oliver Wyman. So, Percival, maybe you should start with a short introduction.
Yeah, sure, happy to. So I'm a principal at Oliver Wyman in our transport and logistics practice. I work pretty much exclusively on postal and parcel, um, based in Switzerland, but kind of all across Europe, and mostly on bigger transformations, multi-year programs, both on the commercial side as well as on the more network and operations side. And yeah, very happy to join you here today.
It's great to have you. Christian, maybe a short introduction from you as well.
Yes, good to have you, Percival, and great to see or not see everyone out there. I hope that you're going to enjoy the next half hour. I'm Christian, CEO and one of the founders of Tembi. Looking forward to presenting some of these results together with Michael and Percival today. But maybe I should just start off with explaining a bit about what Tembi is. So, for if you don't know it, what we do, we track and analyze more than 1 million online web shops across Europe. It's 24 different markets and more than 500 million of products that we actually do track. That gives an intelligence platform for companies that work towards the e-commerce industry, and especially we have a big spike when it comes to the logistics and the last mile. So therefore, it's also a great topic today to look into how does that look in different markets, and especially, of course, in this time with focus on Germany. And I also have to have Percival along with us today, who gives advice and works as advice and strategic consulting company on these issues. So so that's shortly about Tembi. Maybe just a short intro to how we do it, so you know more about that. And basically, we look at these 1.1 million online shops. We actually do track and analyze 2 or 3 times more, and we investigate whether it is a web shop or not. So we look at, do they have products available? Do they have a checkout? Do they have a terms and conditions? Do they have operating payment systems? Are they actually live? Or are they not live? And then we enrich that with other data sources. And that's like how we do the first step. And maybe if we jump to the next slide here, we can have a look at, so what is it then actually that we do? And one of the things that, besides analyzing the web shop and the products that they have available and connecting them to organization numbers and addresses and return address and all these kind of things, one of the things that we do that is especially interesting for this one is that we go deep into the checkout of the individual web shop. So this means that we actually able to go in and look at, if we put specific kind of products in the basket, how does the checkout then actually look? So which delivery providers are there? What are the pricing that are being offered to the consumer? What are the delivery times, the delivery methods, and all these kind of things. And we do this with various technologies, AI driven, which is needed if we do this for more than 1 million sites. And we do this recurringly, so it's not just a one-off. So I think that was just a brief introduction to how we do it. And then Michael, I'll let you take over and explain some of the results here.
Yeah, they're perfect. Just see if I can make the screen bigger on that one. There we go. So the reason we're here today is, of course, to talk about Germany and our latest market report that we'll be releasing after this short little webinar. So what we've done is that we've taken 190,000 web shops that we have in our database, and we've analyzed the checkouts of all of them. And just to give you a start, we're not analyzing any volume numbers. We're just analyzing the presence, the positions, and how the competition looks from a consumer's perspective. So when they're actually in the checkout, what do they see and how does it look? And so to start with Germany, of course, it's DHL's home market. According to Bundesnetzagentur, they have roughly 40% of the market. Some other estimates there's 47 to 49% of the volume shares. Amazon Logistics is a player that has really grown extremely quickly in the market. They're estimated to have something between 15 and 25%. And of course, they are a marketplace, but when we study different markets, we've seen that between 30 and 40% of web shops that exist on Amazon also have their private stores that they operate under their own URL. So that means still, if consumers choose Amazon, of course, Amazon Logistics then gets involved and gets a larger share of the market. Thirdly, we have Hermes 10 to 13%, DPD 8 to 12, GLS 7 to 10, and UPS and FedEx with a bit of smaller share. In terms of product categories, which we also analyze, there's no big surprises. The only thing that kind of caught our eye on the market, that there's a very large amount of web shops that do sell industrial supplies, both to B2C and B2B customers. So that's basically the market that we've looked at. And then when we dive down a little bit deeper into it, of course, looking into size distribution, we see that 79,000 are classified as small web shops. What we mean by that, it's not necessarily that they have small product portfolios, but the revenue numbers, the operations, it's not big in comparison to the large ones. And at our data that it looks right now, around 42% are considered small, 25 are medium-sized, and then large 9%, 2 to 3% are very large. And there's a number of unknowns that we haven't then been able to classify. And then is always the question around white label checkouts. So white label checkouts are where the brand and the service is not visible. So you come to a checkout and you can basically just choose home delivery or out of home delivery. There's no brand, there might be a price, but that also means that you as a carrier have no possibility of actually choosing how your service is presented or how consumers can select you. And throughout the market, what we've seen around Europe, it is that is between 40 and 70% of markets have this setup. It's more common amongst the small web shops. The reason for that is quite often because of Shopify and WooCommerce on their less expensive products do not offer configuration of the checkout. So we can see that the larger the web shops, the less we see white label checkouts because they do want to give consumers more options during the checkout process. For example, selecting carrier or give them more autonomy into that.
Maybe before jumping ahead, Michael, maybe I could just also ask Percival here on the first two slides that we've seen so far. Does any of this surprise you, Percival? And based on this, what would be your reflections on the strategy for some of the last mile operators? Maybe if you just scroll up again, Michael, to the last.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there is a few points here. I mean, the very beginning, I think the second slide or something like that you mentioned when it comes to the checkout transparency, I think that is a key point to start with, because on the one side, if you take it from the perspective of the carriers, or most carriers at least, the shippers, the e-tailers are becoming more and more sophisticated on how they kind of steer their checkout, build their checkout, but also in a white labeling environment, how they kind of allocate volumes between carriers. So transparency over how they are represented in the checkout, where they're ranked, what the prices are that are also displayed to customers, gives you a lot of transparency when it comes to looking at the market and also looking at how your existing customers actually position you, market you in a broader sense. So I think that sort of as a starting point is key when developing a commercial strategy. Maybe more a bit to the German market. The interesting or the kind of special thing about Germany is that the legacy post and the large international player in the country are the same company. And that kind of also explains to some degree, I guess, the very strong market position that DHL has across the board. I mean, also if you saw the out of home points on the previous page, which is not just in Germany, but also in a bigger European context, everyone is kind of fighting for the growing cake of out of home and particularly parcel locker volumes. And of course, it's not just DHL. It's, I mean, DPD and GLS just published that agreement last year to kind of develop those networks together in more of an open concept. So everyone is really pushing to get a larger part of the out of home market. I think one of the things when I first saw it on the shippers and the white labeling share by size group is, in hindsight, it seems intuitive that a lot of the smaller carriers actually have white labeling solutions in their checkout. I was still surprised by the large share from the very large that actually have the checkout as a choice, and have transparent checkout options on their website. It kind of makes sense because when you look at the large carriers, and most of them, sorry, not carriers, large e-tailers, a lot of them try to differentiate also through that choice and customization element towards the final receiver and the consumer. So it makes sense from that perspective also that they try to push this choice in the checkout. Coming maybe back to the first point, I mean, when it comes to what does that mean for a commercial strategy? The point around transparency is obviously key, because in building that, the carriers are not in a static environment, because e-commerce is developing so quickly. The new technologies and buzzwords like AI are becoming a reality for them very quickly, because it's a sheer necessity when it comes to managing the business and down to managing the interface with the final receiver. So being able to at least partially get on par with that and have the visibility over the checkout processes, over the current footprint in the market, to then in a very targeted way also derive the right commercial measures and initiatives towards specific customers, towards specific parts of the market, in order to make sure to grow their share of wallet. This is very key. Yeah.
But that might actually be a neat bridge, thank you, Percival, for the next couple of insights. I think Michael will present then, and then we can dive more into that afterwards.
Yeah, precisely. So in general, what we looked into then, of course, is picking an address in central Berlin to understand what web shops are offering for delivery methods. And here we can clearly see that home delivery is found in 86% of the checkouts that we looked into. Parcel shops only 3%, and parcel lockers only 2%. So, and this is also kind of coincides with the data that we read from reports from DHL that Germany is very much still a home delivery market, despite that parcel lockers have been on the market for a very long time, more than 20 years. Looking at the pricing, we can also see that there's a premium on the home delivery with 46% versus out of home. Parcel shop being a little bit more expensive than parcel lockers. So clearly there is, of course, it is more expensive. And this is the same type of data we then see across all European markets. So this is from our map on our website, where you can go in and basically look into what are the different prices on the different markets. And here we can see that there is usually a difference between 1 and 2 euros for home delivery. In UK, we can find that it's even more expensive. And the Baltic countries, we can also see that prices go up almost like 70 to 80% versus out of home. So that's a little bit on the prices. And then when we started looking into, of course, so how often are the brands, how often are the carriers visualized inside the checkout? So this is what these slides show. So DHL we find in 78.6% of every single checkout we discovered. So clearly dominating the market. Of course, it's a large market with a lot of small websites, web shops, which also means that, of course, there is the long tail from this perspective. So this has nothing to do about the size of the web shop. It's just the fact that they are present and they're doing deliveries for them. DVD being in second position. Remember the statistic that we found from Bundesnetzagentur. Hermes was showed the year 24 to have between 10 and 13% of the volumes. In terms of being present in checkouts, it's roughly the same, but DPD has a much stronger share of presence than what they're estimating in terms of the volumes. And looking into other markets, Poland and UK, where of course we have the legacy incumbent with Royal Mail, we can again see here a similar pattern with 62.6% visibility amongst the web shops. And in Poland, which is a bit structurally different market, where InPost has come in over the last 2 decades and really grown a significant part of the market, being visible in 61.6% of all the web shops. And see Poczta Polska there going down a little bit to 12.4%. And if we take this data and now only look into the first positions, which the next slide will show, so the same pattern shows that if you, of course, have a large presence, that is very often translated also to, of course, having the first position. Again, this is not a qualitative metric, but it showcases from a quantitative perspective how often DHL, amongst those 190,000 web shops that we looked into, in 58% of the cases, we find them in the first position. And in the UK, it's similar, a bit lower. White label impacts here because white label web shops in the UK is very high. So 28.5%, we find UK in the first position, and Poland, again, is dominated by InPost. Then we can take this analysis even further. So what we've then done is to look into, all right, so how does it look when you actually look into the different positions in the checkout? So the data that we have seen, heard, read, suggests that around 60% of the choices go to the thing in the first position, unless it's collect yourself, which we remove from this analysis. We can see on the left side, we can see how often, what type of position do you have? So how number of times are you in the first position versus second versus the third versus the fourth? And then looking into per carrier, which becomes much more interesting, because that is diving into every time we see DHL, how often are in the first position, second, third, and fourth. And this showcased a little bit the dynamic. So when we work with clients, different carriers, we can then look into how does this structure look like? So where do we find the most type of clients? What type of position do they have across the market? And lastly, we can start to dive into this big green one to look into, all right, so how does it look within the client's base? So DHL here, we can see that they are in 81% of all of their clients, they have the first position. But out of 66%, they're the only choice in that checkout, which means that consumers don't have an option to choose any other one, which means that they are locked into this. And this is also super interesting to understand the structural relationship and how the contracts are looking between the different carriers and the different web shops. So this simply means that this is the possibility, of course, that Percy, you talked about allocating our parcels and how do you create that type of strategy. Here, what we look into is to see, okay, how does the kind of the competitive dynamic look like between the different carriers in the checkout?
May I ask you, Percival, because from looking across different markets, have you seen similar patterns as well? And also look at it from a different kind of market positions, either being, the market leader or the challenger or something like, or the newcomer into a market. Which kind of strategies could you advise companies to do from the different market positions?
So if we build on this picture, I mean, you would have to take that a little bit apart by customer segments. So I mean, what stands out, of course, is the 66% where DHL is the only provider, which is pretty wild. I would assume that this is also driven by a lot of smaller web shops that have DHL as their only carrier in the checkout, because when it comes to the larger, mid-sized to large e-tailers, pretty much all of them are running a multi-carrier strategy for them to diversify a little bit, to create some competition also in their supplier pool and so on. In terms of how to use that and translate it into really actionable commercial steps. So again, starting a little bit with the segmentation here of the market of the shippers. One part is, of course, always to understand how am I, independent of if I'm the incumbent or if I'm the challenger, or if I'm a new entrant, how am I actually represented in these web shops? Like, what is the actual positioning that I have in the client base that I'm targeting? And how is that reflective of the strategy? Is that reflective of the agreements that we've also have in place with those carriers? Because this is something that then you always hear it anecdotally, that you know there were agreements made with this shipper to have that checkout position, but in reality, it's not there. So and in B2C, you always have the challenge that you need to win every parcel twice, because first you need to win the contract with the carrier, and then you need to win the consumer in the checkout. So this checkout position, whether you're number one or not number one, this is actually where the biggest difference is. So not so much between 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, but really between being number one or not being number one is huge. And this drives a lot of conversion. So if you're targeting a certain part of the market, and with the corresponding growth ambitions and whatnot, then having the right positioning, having the first positioning is a massive driver for volume growth. So if we sort of take it a little bit apart by segment, and then from the perspective of a carrier, understanding where do I think I should be versus where am I actually, can be very useful in then sort of formulating the right responses in terms of what are the how do I stand in the checkouts versus what I thought I had negotiated with my customers so far? What are maybe the add-ons? What are maybe the incentives that we want to add in order to improve our checkout positioning? And also to understand a little bit from, of course, the competition as well. Like if I'm I don't know, UPS or GLS, I'm going to look left and right and see what Hermes and DPD are doing, and DHL, of course, across those different segments. So I think here it gives you a quite comprehensive view when it comes to the interface to the receiver, both how am I positioned with my customers, but also how am I competitively positioned against my closest competitors. And that gives you a pretty good basis for deriving the right commercial levers.
I think you touched on some really interesting points there, Percival. I think also looking at, of course, we're not revealing any specific clients and how we do it, but there are different ways they actually, succeed at, optimizing their presence. Some we just see that they, in some markets, they dominate from position 3 to 8, right? So if you just look at the presence in the web shops, it looks successful. But if you look at the profitability connected to it and the volumes, might not be the right place to be at least on a longer term. But another question I just had for you, and I know we have about 5 minutes left, and I think it's an important thing here, because looking at Germany like this and looking at the out of home compared to the home deliveries, and it shows at least that in the checkout, home delivery is by far dominates, and it looks much more than you would see in the Baltics or in the Nordics or in the Benelux. And also there's been a big change in Italy and the UK over the last couple of years actually in the out of home. How do you see the future for that going on right now?
So, I mean, it's kind of the German-speaking area of Europe that is really resistant to out of home, because I mean, obviously Germany is also, it's going to be like not just sort of my or our opinion, but whenever you talk to both the shippers as well as the carriers, everybody expects this to grow. So this is also why the carriers are throwing so much capacity on the market. When you look at the expansions in Germany that have happened on the part of DHL, GLS, DPD, and so on, it's a, I might be remembering it wrong, but I think like a 20% CAGR in terms of capacity that has been put on the market in the last couple of years. So everybody is waiting for that kind of switch to happen. The question is, I don't think the question is so much will it happen. The question is more when will it happen. And the other part of that is, however, that what different carriers have found out in different markets, that what worked in Poland is not in the same way replicable in other markets necessarily. So there is a bit of this balance to have market specificities, local receiver preferences that play a big role in here. But overall, we do expect that also in Germany, there will be in the next years an uptick on the out-of-home side, simply because the offerings are getting so much better. Because the whole, especially when we talk parcel locker, I mean, the whole point of it is to be super convenient. And if you have if there is a carrier or several carriers with a very dense network that have a very strong customer journey, that provide a very competitive pricing, and so on, then you suddenly have a lot of reasons to choose out of home or to promote out of home from the point of the shipper. And the question is a little bit when this point will come, that when then the offerings are good enough that they will impact receiver preferences in a structural way. So that's kind of the nuanced answer, I would say.
Thank you for that, Percival, and I think it's really interesting to hear you sharing some of the insights there. Do you see, if we just look at it like a current thing, a short question before we close this one down, the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and the war with Iran and the oil prices, the fuel prices going up, do you expect that to to make that shift move faster, or how do you view that?
To be not, the biggest risk for carriers is not so much on the fuel prices, because the fuel prices in general are being often passed through. I think the biggest risk comes from if this will impact core inflation in Europe and beyond. If it has a big impact on consumer spending, and then we might see a change here, given that out of home and given that lockers in particular are, as we also saw earlier, from a price perspective, the more attractive option. It could, in the long run, have an impact, but this is uncertain. I wouldn't dare to make a to bet on this, because it will also depend on how long and how bad the implications from that will actually be.
Of course. Thank you very much for joining us today, Percival and Michael. The report that it is out now, or just after the webinar?
We will publish it now just after the webinar, and there's going to be much more data on it. For example, we also have quick analysis of the co-occurrence, so who are actually competing with whom in the checkout, how often, and much more data that you can look into. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write any comments, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Have a great day to everyone that followed this webinar today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.